Stu, my dude, Deb Mashek, author of Collabor Hate, incredible book, great interview. The knowledge of relationships that Deb brings and how impactful that is not only to business success but also to success in the home and the implications of a collaboration and understanding, the tools and the science, which I found it fascinating, the science behind collaboration and how we can impact it
Yeah.
was very intriguing conversation to me.
Yeah, man. Super cool. There's a lot that we learn and talk about here, from how we grew up as children and how that impacts the way we react in relationships, to how we can better our relationships, to have higher quality relationships, and why collaboration is so important, but why it's so hard to do in every aspect, from workplace environment to military to relationship to a home to with our spouses, with our kids. Such a good conversation. Don't miss this one. Go listen.
Go listen now.
You're listening to Filling the Storehouse podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Stuart, and we want to walk with you on the journey to living the abundant life through faith, family, and freedom. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours. Together, achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to intentionally fill our storehouse.
All right, Deb, you're going to have to excuse David today. He's just going to be on mute all day long because he just got off of this cold slash COVID slash don't know what it is. But this is probably going to be a good thing because David likes to talk a lot. And today's podcast episode is not going to be so much. So thanks for joining Filling the Storehouse podcast.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here. And David, I'm sorry to hear about your illness.
No, I just want to apologize up front, not only for the stuffed sound, but also for the fact that Stu may have to carry more of the conversation, and I just hate to burden you with that. That's not a place we like to be in this podcast. So
I'll steel myself for the possibility.
Well, the more you talk, the better today, Deb. So if you could, so we got connected on LinkedIn through a mutual connection, Lenore Skenazy. We had her on our podcast talking about her book and her amazing nonprofit organization. And you kind of commented on some stuff, and then we got connected and I saw that you have a book coming out, and I was like, this is a cool topic, and I'd love to dive into this more. And David and I have read through your book, and it's amazing. So if you could, for our audience, give us a little background about who you are and what you do.
Awesome. So I'll start with the book's title because I think that kind of sums it up.
Yeah.
The title is Collabor Hate: How to Build Incredible Collaborative Relationships at Work, even if you'd rather work alone. And I come at this topic as a close relationships researcher. So I study this. I am a scientist who looks at close relationships to understand what makes them work and where we get them wrong. And what I do in my consulting work is take that subject matter expertise and bring it into the workplace, primarily corporations and nonprofits, to help leaders diagnose, why are we hitting these dang headwinds? Why does it seem like these really simple things are taking so long? Why do we have really good people checking out and walking away? And I offer these research-backed interventions and tools to both figure out what's going wrong and to fix it so that we can get more joy out of our workplace relationships.
I just have to ask because you get into this in the book, but as I was reading about your specifically your expertise and what you bring to it, I just cannot help but, we talk about this quite a bit, Stu and I talk about this quite a bit, but people just have lost the ability to just talk, to be civil, to have just normal discourse, critical conversation, critical thought, and to be able to receive and exchange ideas. And I feel like a lot of this is a relational, it's almost like a deterioration in our ability to be relational. And I'm just curious, from your research and what you've seen, are you seeing trends that are driving people, like that are driving a lot of this narrative and are forcing us into these extremes? And if so, how do we, as we aim to collaborate, how do you, are you hopeful for the future? Because I find myself oftentimes being very just pessimistic because I love critical conversation, and it's a skill that we're losing.
So lots to unpack there. Some of the things that come up for me is when we're scared and worried, and when the world is in big, understandably, people go into kind of a self-protection mode where, it feels uncertain. So you lock down and you try to figure out how am I going to get through this? And there's kind of this fight or flight instinct that kicks up. But for others, there's this tend and befriend instinct where actually reaching out and being with others. And I don't just mean hanging out on the couch together, but being with them, like truly being present and being curious about others is a way that we can find comfort through connection. And so, amid all of the ambiguity, amid political polarization, amid let's shut down the world for 2 years, all of these things, figuring out ways to exercise that connection muscle is critically important. I mean, it's like, to me, the secret sauce of what makes the world go round. And there are better and worse things we can do to create that connection. And one of the things you're nudging at here, which I think is really important, is how just to be like at our core, curious about how other people see the world, how to let go of the righteousness that somehow we have cornered the market on the right way to think about the world or the one right solution. Knowing that, by virtue of our mere humanity, we are imperfect creatures. We can't have perfect knowledge. And when we get to learn alongside other people who see the world differently, when we get to ask other people, how do you see it? Not because they're trying to change our mind or we're trying to change their mind, but really they have a piece of the puzzle that's going to help us, thrive, not just survive, but actually thrive amid that ambiguity and uncertainty.
Well, and you mentioned in the very beginning of your book, in the introduction, kind of your own background of how you grew up and how that has made an impact on your studies, and how different social classes and backgrounds can truly have a positive way of this collaboration of critical thinking, of different ideas. Could you hit on that a little bit? Because I thought it was super interesting.
Yeah, I think I ended up with the opening line of the book was something like the trailer park, my parents' alcoholism, and my PhD. These were my 3 great teachers of collaboration.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true. So I grew up in North Platte, Nebraska, in this little trailer park, up through, I think I moved in maybe 5th grade. But it was the ultimate. I know you mentioned you've had Lenore Skenazy on the show before. She's amazing. She has this organization called Let Grow, and it talks about the free range parenting movement. Growing up in a trailer park in Nebraska was the ultimate free range parenting move. So, us kids were booted out at, maybe 9 a.m., maybe earlier. And the only rules were, if somebody's hurt, go tell their parent, and don't leave the boundary. So there was literally a chain link fence that was like, you can't go beyond the chain link fence, because once you do, you're outside of the trailer park. But that was really pretty much all of the rules. And the kids, we spent our days figuring out how to negotiate conflict, figuring out how to transform this fairly sterile, well, not sterile and isn't clean, but this fairly uninteresting landscape where there were, I remember a couple trees, there were lots of abandoned tin sheds on the empty lots. But oh my gosh, as a kid, those were amazing spaces for creativity, for innovation, for figuring out what, we were making up games. There were no adults telling us like, this is how you play the game. We had to exercise that muscle early and often of how to get along with other people and how to have your own needs and interests, how to express them, how to have good boundaries, how to address other people's needs and interests so they would actually come out and play with us again the next day. So all of those complexities were there. And so that's kind of the trailer park piece. And then both of my parents were alcoholics. So they died when I was 24. So if I talk about them in past tense, that's why. So both of them struggled with addiction most of my life. And because of that, anyone who's been in a home with all sorts of different addictions knows that it's kind of hard for those adults to truly adult, that they're struggling. They have needs of their own that are not being met, and the capacities to provide for children and for others are diminished. And so I figured out really early on, and I have like really, really early memories of this, like preschool level of teachers taking me under their wing and figuring, like, I somehow was signaling to these adults in the world that I needed some, TLC, I needed some affection, some care, some food, whatever it was. And other adults were circling the wagons. And so without ever being able to name it until a lot of therapy, a lot of years later, figuring out like, oh, that was, again, because of connection, and being able to come together to get those needs met. So those were two of the kind of background features. And, I'm 48. So it's amazing, like even after all of these years, how salient some of those lessons are and how they absolutely color how I engage in the world. So, when I was making the decision, do I want to write a book? I really love talking about collaboration. Gee, I think there's something useful here that other people can use. One night, it was over a year ago, about a year ago, sitting on the couch and really having that heart to heart with myself of, Deb, are you really going to do this? This is no easy thing. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to push hard. Can you do it? Should you do it? All of those questions were coming up for me. And then I distracted myself with LinkedIn. And this article comes across from Jay Von Bavel. It was his LinkedIn post. It wasn't his article, but the article talked about the role that social class diversity plays in people being able to collaborate well. And that those of us who maybe have a scrappier background than others are absolutely bringing something essential to the mix in terms of, work ethic and figuring out a way to get it done and, being creative with the resources you have, that sort of thing. And it was that moment sitting on the couch that this little, space in my heart opened up, and I was like, heck yeah, I'm going to do this. Let's do this. I do have something to say. The world does need to hear this, and I want to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, that's super cool. David,
Yeah,
before you talk, I just wanted to hit on, like, as I read that, I definitely thought about just all the military experiences that I went through and just the mission that we were running, or I flew helicopters, and like there's a lot of people that are involved in flying helicopters, and people like turning engines and fixing the engines on my helicopter come from very different backgrounds, and I had to put my trust and faith in them just as much as someone that maybe came from my own background. So I just, like, it really resonated with me, that quote that you hit on in the book. So super cool. David, over to you.
And I'll share there really quickly too. Like,
yeah,
if the helicopter's working or not, that's literally a life and death situation.
Totally.
Unlike a lot of the collaboration I talk about in the book about, did the person get the memo out the door to the client? Like all important, we could talk about all of them, but with the idea that sometimes this working together thing, lives are depending on it.
Yeah, it's life.
Sorry.
Yeah,
David.
No, I'm glad that you mentioned the story that drove you to write the book, because that was probably in a different way. It was very impactful to me in that when you're going into the topic of collaboration, when you're going into as a leader seeking to be more collaborative, to get to a point, in the and we'll talk about the Mashek. What do you call it? The diagram? I'm brain farting.
The Mashek matrix.
Mashek,
It's
Mashek matrix. Sorry.
My oddly self-referential tool for collaboration.
It. No, it's very good. But the idea as you go into these efforts to maximize your productivity and the collaboration, it is step one being a recognition that a diverse background actually gets you the best product. And that really resonated with me. I really liked the fact that, and what it caused me to think about was, how do you be intentional to seek out the opportunity to diversify your opinion, and put things in you. Like, I just read the book, American Dirt, and I'm sure people have lots of opinions about American Dirt, but the impact it had on me was regardless of all the political whatever, or, the literary pushing of the book, any of that kind of stuff. The fact that it brought an awareness to a different perspective was very, very empowering. And I think the more you do that, and what I thought you highlighted beautifully is to intentionally do that actually sets you up for greater success.
Yeah, and you're touching on too some of the drivers. So in some of the diversity work out there, there's this notion of, it's diversity for diversity's sake. We need representation on all teams, that sort of thing. And that's one model, absolutely. Another model is we do it because whatever it is we're trying to do together will be better because of that diversity. That's also really important. But as you're touching on, there's we have stereotypes of each other. So the idea of like, oh, trailer park trash or something like that, when I tell my trailer park story, so other people will have an assumption about me and what I could possibly bring that's not always going to be favorable. Likewise, I carry inside messages about whether or not I'm worthy and can contribute. And so we bring that mix into these settings, and then it's up to all of us, I think, to be really intentionally figure out how are we going to engage that range of possibilities and not close off possibilities just because of where our minds go, either us as individuals or the people who we're interacting with. And I think, for leaders, for business leaders, it's incumbent upon them to figure out, well, how do we structure, how do we incentivize slowing down enough to actually get to know the other people in the room as people, so that we really can unlock that potential of doing, of being, of achieving together.
So,
and I think that piece is huge. Sorry, Stu. I think that piece is huge when you, because I maintain this, and I'll believe it to the day I die. But if you sit down with anybody, for the most part, 99% of the population, if you sit down with them and you have give it a 5-minute conversation, you will realize that you have way more in common than you have that separates you. And just that knowledge opens the doors to rich conversation and blessing and relationship and collaboration, that it's right. It's so obvious and it's right there, but we just allow the little things, the extremes in our life to be the things that I can't talk to you because you are a Democrat or whatever.
Right.
And in reality, we both want secure housing. We both want to feed our families. We both want to have an impact, be meaningful. I mean, we have all these things that are very powerful in common, and we're human beings, right? And I think that's where American Dirt is on the top of my mind, where it humanizes the struggle. And you're like, okay, this isn't just a brown mass. Like, there are people in here. And the same thing could be said for all this discourse, which I think is super powerful. So even someone like Stu,
yeah. I'm reminded of again, going back to Lenore, one of her mantras is talk to strangers. Like, tell your kids, talk to strangers, practice this. It doesn't, there's no reason it needs to be a scary thing. But I'm curious, David, what are some of your favorite conversation openers? I really despise "How are you?" Because I think it invites this really rote "I'm fine, how are you?" and you've exactly learned nothing. Yeah. What are some of the questions you love asking that tends to open that relational moment?
For me, it's the question like, how are you? But it's not letting them off the hook. That's what for me. So it's like I oftentimes employ this as a leader, or even as Stu and I are super tight. We've been friends for 25 years.
Wow.
And even now, like, hey dude, how you doing today? Well, I'm fine. I'm good. Well, but you kind of have a grumpy face. So like, how are you doing today? Because we know each other well enough to call out the grumpy face. But when it's not somebody that I've always believed in asking why, 2 to 3 times. So how are you? No. How are you really doing? And then after that second one, it usually like opens up the door to,
because you're saying, no, I'm sincerely interested.
I'm genuinely interested, and I don't believe that you're just fine. Like, that's not enough for me. And so I think being persistent, I believe in being persistent with it. Right. And it's been a very rich conversation every time that it's happened. Not necessarily good or bad, right? It's not that, well, I'm terrible. Well, I'm really good because I just had a baby and I just blah, blah, blah. And you get to know somebody and you're like, oh, let's talk about that. That's exciting. And so for me, it's more of the the continuous digging over asking a different question per se.
And oftentimes that's annoyingly persistent.
You're like, stop already.
Like, dude, stop. I don't want to talk right now.
Yeah, he doesn't want to talk. But then we talk about it and
Yeah.
we get to a better place.
Yeah, no, it's good.
I love some of my go-to ones are, what's your story? What's, what are you thinking about today? Or what do you do? What's got your attention? Things like that.
So we actually had a similar conversation. We have a men's group called the Storehouse Mastermind, and we had a similar conversation about like, how do you talk to your kids? Like you pick up your kids from school. Hey, how was your day? Oh, fine. What'd you do? Oh, nothing. Right, like that, and that's it. Like, okay, that's the end of the conversation. So we were actually challenging ourselves to ask different questions, and so we had come up with different questions to ask. And one of the men in our group was like, "Yeah, hey, one day after school, I picked up my son and I asked him how I was doing as a dad." Like,
wow.
And he got some pretty powerful responses, and it brought a pretty good conversation to the car ride. And so all of us did that, and same, like we all had amazing conversations with our children about how we're doing as dads, and it was really, really cool.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, just lots of fun questions like that, that kind of hurt like way more conversations, like at the dinner table, right? Same thing. So,
I love the idea of a family 360. I'm a single mom, and my kiddo and he turns 13 this week. Every night before bed, our questions are, what was a highlight from your day? What was a not happy moment? What's something you did to make the world a better place today? And where's the gratitude in your heart? So it's a gratitude you're carrying. And sometimes he'll say, I don't want to do the questions, or he'll race through them. And other times, oh my gosh, the answers that come up are so deep. And I feel I know him so much better because we take the time to do that. But sometimes, I'm like, man, you should have been to bed 30 minutes ago. And I feel like I need to rush through them. But to the best of my human ability, resist doing that because, I'm not going to get that particular conversation ever again.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. Hey, so why do people, back to the book, why do people hate collaboration? Why the silent H, right? I mean, and I've been there, and you mentioned, going through college classes, MBA courses, the schools push collaboration, group projects all the time. And every single time I got a group project in my MBA class, I hated it.
And have that inside groan. So you mentioned the silent H. So when people see the book cover, you'll see that the H is like hiding between these parentheses. And it was meant to, what I'm trying to do is give voice to that which is difficult about working together, because I feel like only by bringing light to that can we actually create strategies to overcome it. So, a lot of us feel that we're supposed to like collaboration, or it is something that we really want to do. It's something that we understand either intuitively or explicitly, that this is the secret for solving the world's most complex problems that none of us can solve on our own. So that's on the one hand, but on the other hand, people have experiences like Stu, you're saying, where you get thrown into this group work. It's poorly structured. We're not really getting to know the other people. And, then one person ends up doing all the work. It's a total slug. Despite all this time and effort, the project or the product is really lackluster and uninspiring. And, so we try to do these collaborations well, but then people start pulling in their own direction, and there's desperately little communication, even less follow through. And you do enough of this with enough people, what you come to notice is that tension and friction starts to mount. People are like, get me out of here. People actually leave. So it's a flight risk for organizations when collaboration's not going well, for instance. And I think part of the challenge here is that very rarely do we actually ever teach people how to collaborate well. So it's true. And, when my kiddo was in third grade, he came home just so mad that this little girl in his class was telling everybody what the project was going to look like, and like bossing everyone around, and wasn't listening to anybody else's ideas. And he just listed off, all these pain points of collaboration. But it doesn't stop in elementary school. I spent 14 years teaching college students at Harvey Mudd College, and also interviewing and doing research with students all over the country and asking, are you learning how to collaborate well and getting training on this? And at Harvey Mudd, a lot of the students were getting training because it's a liberal arts school for science and engineering. And so they were talking about, how to do engineering design groups and things like that. But not everybody was, or, you as a teacher, a lot of us will assign group work, but not necessarily talk about how to do that group work well. Or, here are some 10 foundational conversations you should have on day one with your group in order to get this off in the right direction. And then, you get to the MBAs, to the business schools, and, they're teaching how to write an amazing business plan, but not necessarily how to create connection with the people that you're going to need to be in relationship with in order to make this business plan happen. And then you get into the workplace and you're surrounded by all of these people who also value collaboration, but who also don't necessarily know how to do it. And so when you do get training, it tends to be on the job training from other people who are kind of feeling their way through the muck. And so big surprise, there's a lot of mixed feelings out there, even though we know we should want to collaborate, even though we know we will need it to do well. It's not always fun or fulfilling or easy.
Well, and I think that was one of my favorite things is that you're not only highlighting an issue and the benefits of collaboration, but also the where we fail, but you're giving practical, data-driven solutions to get to a different part of the quadrant, right? To the matrix. And I love how you said, hey, if you made a bet on if there's going to be a 2x2 in this business book, then go collect your money. I thought that was pretty funny. But and if you don't, obviously our listeners don't, the book has not come out yet, so they don't know what I'm talking about. So go get the book and you'll get it pretty quickly. But I'm curious, would you say the barrier is just a lack of understanding the practical applications, or not practical applications, but the practical ways to get better at collaborating? It's just a lack of understanding or knowledge that there's these tools out there that we can use to become better? Or is there some kind of reticence because we know it's important inherently, so we just think we should know how to do it?
I love that question, because it's like, where is this coming from? And I will say with the matrix, if you guys are open to it, I can send you a link to a PDF where people can download it so you can see it. And of course, just reach out anytime with follow-up questions. But I think it's coming. There are a couple drivers. I think one of the drivers is that, first of all, the word collaboration is, we toss it around culturally to pretty much mean any form of working together. So, it's like, I think I use the example of a bag of potato chips and a tennis shoe get together and, they're going to save the world or something. Like, there are so many collabs out there culturally right now. And it's like, well, that's me. Yeah, I don't know. That's a certain kind of working together, but that's not necessarily what we mean by collaboration. And then there are things where people are just exchanging information, but then doing their own thing with it, with no regard for a shared goal, or no regard of actually sharing resources or learning from each other. That's a form of together work, but it's not actually collaboration. So I think reason number one is there's a lack of clarity on what we mean by collaboration. I think another driver of this kind of reticence that you're talking about, David, is that there's this cultural expectation that we're social animals. Therefore, we should either be able to do relationships or not do them. You're either good at relationships or you're bad at relationships. And unlike what you all are doing in your mastermind group, for instance, where you're actually talking about how do we become better parents, better partners, better friends, a lot of people don't ever get that exposure to any sort of interpersonal relationship that's out there in the world. It's striking to me that, we have prenatal classes, we have labor and delivery classes, but it's rare to see the person who then also goes on and takes the parenting class. And I guarantee after that baby was born, that was just like tip of the iceberg stuff, in terms of the parenting. So I think collaboration suffers a similar mythology around it, and that you're either good at it or you're bad at it. And because of that, we also lack awareness that there are better and worse things you can do to facilitate these relationships. And thus we're not going after the professional development that would be necessary in order to kind of pull back the curtains, figure out what are the mechanics, what are the relational pieces that you need to have in place to go from Collabor hate up the quadrant to Collabor great.
Well, and you said in your book, like, relationships are hard. Like, we're
so hard.
So hard. And this relationship quality definition, it's squishy. Like, it's subjective. It's our own self-perception of this feeling of, good or bad, or and you kind of hit on some of these qualities that make, either a good feeling of relationship or a bad feeling of a relationship. And again, it's all stuff that, like, nobody talks about, nobody teaches, right?
Yeah. And it's that relationship quality thing is the most studied construct in the psychology of close relationships literature. And that subjective sense of how good or bad your relationship is predicts fascinating things like mortality. And this has to do with in your marital relationship, predicts mortality. It predicts how quickly researcher inflicted wounds heal. Yes, that's a thing, like where they like put these suction cuffs on people and give them blisters, and then see if they can predict from relationship quality how quickly those blisters will heal. Those people who have high relationship quality heal faster. Fascinating stuff.
Wow.
And the ideas that I offer in the book, and I'm happy to talk about some of them if you like, they come straight from how to make our marriages and friendships and close relationships awesome. What I'm doing is exporting them, or importing them rather, into the workplace. So, things like be responsive to, invest in clarifying expectations. What do you want from me? What do you need from me? Actually behaving in ways that are aligned with those expectations. So I'm fond of saying this stuff is not rocket science, it's relationship science.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that you talk about, how people differ based off of just their personality, how they grew up, or how they were, how the God-given traits that they have versus this attachment orientation. I was talking to my wife about it because after reading that section about attachment orientation, how your experiences as a child and how you were raised really determine how you are thinking about the world, how you are handling relationships. Because my wife and I grew up differently, and I can see now how she reacts to things, responds to things, thinks about things based off of the way she was raised. And that makes me really want to dig in more to being the best dad that I could possibly be, because I know it's going to impact them now based off of this attachment orientation.
Yeah. And that theory has been really profound for me too. And I got to say, when I first encountered it as a graduate student, I was very dismissive because it sounded kind of blamey, because, I'm very anxious, and I realize it's by virtue of having really inconsistent presence and responsiveness of the adults in my life. But I didn't, I hadn't done much of my internal work by the time I encountered it. So I was like, man, they're blaming me. That's bad. But now I totally get it. I mean, we're all creatures who are learning by virtue of what the environment, including our social environment, is providing for us. And if I have if you grow up expressing your needs and you're either punished for doing so, or the caretakers who are there are unable or unwilling to respond to those needs, what you learn internally is that I'm not worthy, like little kid head. You don't say like, oh, they're being a bad parent. Instead, what you internalize is I'm not worthy of being cared for and responded to. My needs don't matter. It's hard just to erase those. They really get down into the core of the self. You don't just erase those when you come of age as an adult. And so they're with us in our adult relationships. And we also don't just happen to erase them when we cross the threshold into the workplace. They are with us. And they color whether and how we ask for help. They color whether and how we accept help. the messages we tell ourselves about why other people are offering assistance, all of these things that are really critical to building essential collaborations.
Well, and I think it's interesting because there's probably, one of the things that Stu and I talk about often, and especially in the mastermind, is being self-aware. And I think when that self-awareness, one, it's obviously super beneficial to get beyond some of these strongholds and some of these lies, quite frankly, but a lot of times they're painful. And so people don't necessarily, everybody says they want to be self-aware, but to put in the work to be self-aware, to put in the work to, whether it's therapy or digging into or having a very difficult conversation with your parents so that you can move past these things, most people don't want to put in that work to get to that point. And so there's that element. But I also love one of the things you pointed out, and it's particularly in our American culture, where these relational things come into play. We spend a lot of time at work. And so, when you talk about these relationships and collaboration, and yeah, it's not your marriage, but a lot of times you're spending more time with these people in relationship than you are at home with the people that you identify as is your priority relationships. So there's this huge amount of time that why it's so impactful to also to get this right at work, right?
Yeah, I always worry I'm going to screw up the name of this agency, but I think it's the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics that keeps track of all of this stuff. And based on the data they publish, Americans spend more time at work than in all other waking activities combined. And then my data that I collected for the Workplace Collaboration Survey, people, it's like 3/4 of people report spending approximately 3.2 hours per day collaborating. And roughly 1/4 of people are saying they spend like 80% of their time at work collaborating. So that's a heck of a lot of togetherness. And, this idea that the habits of heart and mind that enable us to do that work well are the same ones that are going, out back to our kitchen table. But the other thing is, like, at work, when things are going horrible, when I really am having a hard time being around you, this big project where I was counting on you to do your thing, you dropped the ball, and now it's making us look bad. It's making me look bad. Those are the stresses we carry home with us. That's what we're talking about at the table. That's the reason we can't go to sleep at night. That's what I'm waking up at 3 a.m. thinking about. It's that relational piece. It really, really matters to get, like you said, we have to get it right at work so that we can be healthier people, individuals, when we get back to that kitchen table.
So you talk about how we can intentionally do things to increase this relationship quality. And you listed 9 ways to increase that. And I thought that was in itself just super interesting. This is all stuff that we can do to better our relationships, which that in itself, like you said, you better relationships at work, you then come home, you're happier, you then better your relationships with your spouse, with your kids, with your friends. It's really impactful on this stuff. Could you talk about some of these ways to better our relationship quality?
Yeah. Can I ask if there was a favorite that you were like, wow, let's dig into that one?
Yeah.
Because I think I would bore everybody if I start listing 9 things. So
yeah,
maybe
I actually
pick a favorite.
I actually circled it. My favorite was bring the donuts.
Well, there you go.
Because it hit me, because it made me think about some of the businesses that David and I have started, and how we were hoping for more of this communal norm type of relationship. And it ended up not being the case. It ended up being more of just transactional, this exchange relationship. And we ended up like completely changing our business model. And now we're doing this mastermind thing because that's what we were seeking. We were seeking these communal norms. We were seeking like to be of service, to serve people and guide people. And we didn't want to have this exchange relationship. And it ended up being the case in our first business that we started.
That's beautiful. So to unpack the language you're using there around the exchange versus communal relationships, super interesting. So
Yeah.
there's, this continuum of relationships, and we're not saying one end of the spectrum is good or bad, because all along the continuum, we need all these relationships out there in the world. But on the exchange side, this is where it's very transactional. It's tit for tat. It's, I give the bus driver my $3. He drives me across town. It's somebody comes to my house and I, provide money in return, thanking them for cleaning because I am not going to have time to do that anytime this month. Like, the very transactional. On the other end of the spectrum, we have these communal relationships where nobody's keeping track of who does what, or, I did the laundry last week, so you have to do it this week. Not saying you can't have that more alternating thing, especially for those chores that nobody likes to do. It makes sense to try to balance them out. Got it. But what's interesting in the relationships literature is that if we behave in more communal ways, we're able to nudge that connection and that relationship quality. And if there's somebody who you would like to be in a better quality relationship with, or you'd like to be a closer friend to, if we treat them with those exchange norms, you're actually signaling to them, I don't feel the same way about you. I don't want to be in close relationship with you. So what the recommendation is for Bring the Donuts, it's, first of all, I really, really love donuts. Like, I have a one donut a week policy. I think it keeps me at peak. And,
Nice.
this is, so I gave a presentation to a group once, and this guy in the group got really upset that I was advocating for unhealthy eating. So you could also bring, like, a bag of baby carrots, whatever would be good for everybody. But for me, it's all about the donuts. But the idea is, like, how do you, what can you do in your world that improves the experiences of others? And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be, hey, I'm on my way back to the kitchen. Can I take that plate for you? Or I'm getting a refill of coffee. Can I grab one for you? Or I noticed your wheel was squeaking and it, on your chair. I hope you don't mind. I put some WD-40 on it, or, like it was bothering you or something like that. Like, just finding these little ways of making the world better for others nudges that collaborative relationship quality. And it's very much, the mastermind where you're talking about being in service to others. It's very much that vibe of, how do I we've all got gifts. So how do we bring them into the world, make them available with no strings attached, solely just to improve somebody else's lot in life?
Yeah, we had a podcast. We had two podcast guests on at the same time, and they've both been married for 41 years. And so we were talking about just the secrets of being married for that long. And one of the things that, one of the gentlemen said was, well, I know my wife loves Heath bars. So every time I'd go to the store, I would just bring back a Heath bar for her. Yeah, it's not very healthy, but like, I know, like, that was her love language, and I would just bring back a Heath bar. So, same thing, right? Like,
yeah,
bring the donuts. And, so I thought that was, and it was just making me think about, what can I do with my spouse? What can I do with my friends? What can I do with our mastermind group that I can just pour in, right? And just,
I love the idea that Heath bar might be its own love language. I think I would check that one off too. But the other thing that's embedded in that is the idea of what would that person want? So she loves Heath bars. It's not that he loves giving her Heath bars, even though he loves that too, but it starts with what her needs and wants are. And how do we know those things? We've got to be asking and observing and paying attention. So, he could have easily encoded that as, she loves candy bars, and bringing back a Snickers, which, yeah, nice, but being observant about the Heath bar and actually choosing to activate on that because that's what she loves, that takes a little extra attention. I mean, after 41 years, she could have course corrected easy enough too. But after, a single conversation with somebody, you learn something if you're paying attention.
Well, and I just, for the record, want to say that Snickers bars are vastly superior to a Heath bar. Just want to throw that out there.
For you, yeah.
Yeah, for me. What I love, and it's funny because it kind of goes back to, the questions that you said you hate. One of the questions that I hate is, how can I add value to you today? And what I love about what you just said is you're not asking that question. What I love about value is just bringing value, right? And identifying where you can bring value, whether it's folding the laundry, bringing a Heath bar, squirting the squeaky wheel, whatever it is that you're doing, you're taking action, you're being intentional, because that also feeds into building a relationship. But it goes away from that, putting the responsibility on the other party to identify, okay, how can I help you today? No, that's not very useful. You're putting the pressure back on me to say what you can do. And it's also uncomfortable because I don't, I'm now, you're putting me in a position to ask you for something. So I love the action-oriented way that you describe doing that to build the relationship, and also bringing and adding value. And it requires effort, right? Pay attention. I like Heath bars. I don't like Snicker bars. Okay. Well, I'll bring you that. I would not bring you, Deb, a bag of carrots. I'll bring you a donut, right?
Thank you.
Pay attention.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And it's interesting too, because we also have to be mindful of gender dynamics kicking up here. So in a workplace where sometimes women will be, by virtue of socialization or what's happening in that workplace, start like, oh, I guess I have to do like pick up other people's dishes. I'm not doing that. I totally get that. And I would not say do this without at end, like we all should be contributing to it. And if you notice other people are never helping out, then back off of it and don't do it. You don't want to do it ad nauseum. So that's important. But then also this idea of bringing value without necessarily being asked, it's a huge burden. And I'm thinking now again about, I keep going back to close relationships too, and thinking about marriages, because I know that's something you and your listeners talk a lot about. If I am in a marriage, for instance, and I always rely on my partner to say, oh, hi, honey. Yeah. The laundry needs put away. The dishwasher needs unloaded, and the grass is really long. Can you go mow it? What you're doing is putting that person in the manager role, which is a huge cognitive burden. That means they have to be the ones carrying around that checklist. So in addition to likely doing a whole heck of a lot of the other stuff, you're without having a conversation, assigning them the role of being the manager, and as opposed to you just having your eyes open and say, like, clearly the grass needs to be cut. So I love that you point that out. And I'll add, I do think it's okay to ask, what would be helpful here? So if somebody, for instance, is dealing with a chronic or a huge health diagnosis or something, not assuming that bringing a casserole and throwing it in their freezer is what's really going to be helpful. They might already have 20 there, but you can say things. Here are 3 ways that I stand ready to be here for you. Would you like me to activate on any of those? So you're not telling them to go do the thought work for you, but do you want me to coordinate the meals, offer rides, take the kids for the weekend? Those are the 3 things I can do. So just to complicate it a little bit, there might be ways of both offering and letting people have some agency in there too.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, back to the book, because we're going to be running short on time. I really want to deep dive my favorite chapter 6, because I think this is very germane to Stuart and I, but getting the heck out. And I really want to, understand. No,
we can skip that one.
But yeah, we can skip that one.
Yeah.
But I do think it's also important. I had an interesting conversation with somebody yesterday that this individual asked, he knows both Stu and I, and he asked kind of how that dynamic and the businesses and things were going. And I offered to him that one thing that I love about Stu and my relationship is that we're very open, right? And we talk about things like, okay, well, what if an opportunity comes up for you that doesn't come up for me? What happens if, I want to pursue other opportunities? And, it's these conversations I think are so important. And when you're talking about collaboration and getting to that next level, I think there's also an acknowledgement of, hey, whether it's going to come to an end or it's going to be redefined or look different, understanding that up front, that there is an element of, I think you call it, all relationships end, right? Well, that doesn't have to be, I don't want anybody to misunderstand what that means. Like, oh, not everybody's going to get a divorce. That's not like the end state necessarily, but there is an acknowledgement that things change, it's fluid, and to be upfront and honest about it really helps to prepare you for something that down the line is inevitable.
Yeah, and I love there's a saying that you can never step in the same river twice, that, all of us are developing as individuals, all relationships are changing, the circumstances around which our collaborations are unfolding are always changing. So not assuming that the commitment we made, in this case is not, or that we can't negotiate it or revisit it or have a conversation about it or be curious about what else might be possible. So there's that piece. I also think that we need to be more intentional about when we say yes to collaborations in the first place. So, granted, you can't always have a choice. There are some workplaces that are very heavy-handed. It's like, you must do this, you must work with this person. But imagining those situations, like the two of you in business, where you get to decide whether or not you're going to do this. How do you decide? I think the first question to ask yourself is this opportunity actually aligned with my values, my interest? If it's not, I think we should say no to that collaboration, because even if you can, muster the energy to like activate on it, it's going to be really hard to sustain your engagement at the level that you could potentially if it was value aligned. So I think that's number one. I think the second question to ask is, am I able to contribute meaningfully to this shared endeavor? And here I mean two different things. First of all, do I actually have resources, skills, perspectives that will bring value to this shared work? Just because it sounds like a cool project doesn't mean I'm going to be a good player for it. And having, again, that self-awareness to say, maybe I'm not the best person. Maybe this is a place where I should refer so-and-so because I think they could do a better job in this important thing. I also mean, so am I able to contribute? Do I actually have the headspace, the time on my calendar to do the good work? I think this is one of my biggest pet peeves actually with collaboration is people say, yes, yeah, that sounds great. I would love to work with you on that. And then they're not able to, not because they don't want to, but they have no time to reply to the email, to draft the memo, to call the pizzeria down the street to see if they'll sponsor the Little League team. And if they don't activate, either somebody else has to pick up the slack and do it for them, which impinges on that person's time with their family or other things that maybe they were committed to doing. But it also means the project is going to have to stall out. Neither of those are good outcomes for anybody, including the person who said yes when they shouldn't have. So question number one, is it value aligned? Question number two, do I have time to do this? Question number three is, are the right resources and skills in place to actually launch whatever this shared endeavor is? So, if you're at work and the boss is like, yeah, you go help plan the employee party or something, and the budget for this is $5, say no to that, because you're not going to be able to do anything interesting. It's going to be frustrating, and amazing things can happen on a shoestring. So I don't mean to say they can't, but just collaborations are more likely to succeed when they're well resourced out of the gate. And then the fourth question, and I love this one, is the other person or are the other people able to contribute meaningfully to the collaboration? If you know that, gosh, I would love to be on a part of this project, it's super value aligned, I totally can help, make this rock, but you would have to do it with somebody who never does their stuff, or who takes a my way or the highway orientation, or who disappears for months on end. Say no, because that collaboration will be such a slog. It's going to be so much energy because that other person is involved. So having good collaborators is key. And I wish we were better able to say no to these opportunities to work together. But sometimes it's hard to, both because the way our work is structured, but also culturally, there's we're supposed to want to work together. So this is one of my soapboxes of, let's say no to the bad collaboration opportunities.
This is good. This is a fun conversation. I've really enjoyed reading your book. And I think the intention of the book was mainly for the workplace, but I think there's so many good lessons with just relationships in general. And it brought me to a place of thinking about my relationship with my bride and with my kids and with David and my friends and business, people. So guys and gals, get this book. It comes out, Kindle version January 23rd,
Yep.
hardcover 24th January.
It's a soft cover, but yeah,
Okay, soft cover.
Yeah.
Okay.
On January 24th.
And best place to get more information about you and the book. Where should we send them?
So go to collaborhate.com. I was so excited when I found that URL was available. It totally locked in the title of the book. I was like, that's a win. And there you can learn all about me and my consulting work, and also get direct links to my social media. So I try to be on TikTok every day once,
nice.
And definitely on LinkedIn every day. So the TikTok thing is new, trying to build that up. Fascinating space. Anyway, so get in touch, and I love continuing the conversation. So reach out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dave?
Awesome. Hey, and I just want to throw one more out there for your consulting business. myco.consulting is another place that you can find Deb and look at her different opportunities and sources there. It's awesome information, ton of great stuff. Thank you so much, Deb. I really appreciate the fact that you made that decision to write this book, and that you were pushed via LinkedIn to validate that sentiment, but also to take action on it. Love it. Ton of I think just really, we talked about it very briefly off record, but just how this could impact all industries. I wish I had a book like this early in my military career. So I think that this is a hugely important topic, very beneficial, not only in the workplace, but in our homes, and building relationships, and really ultimately being intentional, which is something that we love. So thank you, Deb. Appreciate it.
Such a pleasure to get to have today's conversation. So I had a chance to listen to a couple of your episodes prior to today, and just love the guests you have on, the topics you're covering, your interview style. So keep bringing your gifts up to the world too.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Guys and gals, reach out to Deb. We'll put all the links in the show notes. Get the Mashek Matrix for free. Put that link in there, and share this. Go buy the book, share this episode, reach out to Deb, and most important, go fill the storehouse.
Yeah, thank you, friends. Make it a great day.
Man, this was a fun conversation. Do you feel like you're a better collaborator now that we talked about this stuff?
Absolutely, I do.
Questionable.
No, what I really did enjoy though is the fact that, and it was very validating from our mastermind efforts as well, in that these are things you can get better at. There's an element of self-awareness. There are tools. There's data-driven knowledge and understanding about collaboration, relationship building, and not only understanding who you are and digging into that, but understanding how you can be better for others. I think all this stuff, I really appreciated and loved the hard, tangible, action-oriented things that we could do and implement to become better collaborators, and ultimately how that grows our relationships and makes us closer to the people that we want to be, which I think was really, really cool part of this conversation in this book.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely dive into this book. Really good, beyond just kind of the workplace environment. And it will make you better. Like just thinking about how you're showing up to your relationships. Good stuff. So go get it. Collaborhate.com, and have a good day.
That's right. No, don't have a good day. Make it a great day.
Yes, sir. Good call.
See you.